Hey everyone, very quickly before we get into the video, the YouTube channel recently reached 10,000 subscribers, and to celebrate that, I'm going to be doing a Q&A next week. Now, in order to gather all of the questions, I set up a channel in my Discord channel specifically for this. If you've ever wanted to ask me a question, can be about anything, then head over to the link in the description towards my Discord channel, and then you can go and ask your question there. Now, back to the video. Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today we're talking a little bit more about Black Mage, as earlier this week I decided to take it into the 24-man, something that I have been wanting to do for a little while now for two reasons. First reason being that I've actually been really enjoying Black Mage ever since that I picked it up in patch 5.2 to actually play it a little bit in Savage Raiding as well. I have the gear for it. I might not have the best in slot, because the best in slot has like 3700 spell speed, I believe, and mine is around 2500 because I play all three casters, so I basically have gear for all three as well, so I don't need to be switching melds if I want to play Black Mage, or if, for example, I don't want to play Black Mage at some point and I need to remeld for Summoner or Red Mage, didn't want to do that, so that's why I don't have the crazy high spell speed that most Black Mages are running at the moment. Because of that, I might be cancelling some casts here or there that I would have otherwise been able to complete if I had that extra 1000 spell speed available to me. Now, that's the first reason. I really enjoy Black Mage, which is why I'll talk about it a little bit more in the rest of the video as well. But the second reason was that when we went in day one into this raid, we also had a Black Mage in the party, and he was hating life because he felt like there was too much movement into the fights and that we couldn't really, or that he or she couldn't really do the damage that they wanted to do, so they even asked us to kick him or her a few times throughout the run of the 24-man. Now, of course, this is just a 24-man raid. You don't really need to play the best of your ability. As long as you can just slog through the fight, we'll be just fine, so that's why we decided to not kick the guy or girl, of course. But basically, it still made me kind of wanted to take a look myself whether or not the fight really is all that bad, because so far everything that I've done in the 24-man has been ranged physical DPS and Summoner. I've played a bunch of Machinist in there because I really like Machinist. Probably still my favorite ranged physical DPS. If it's not Machinist, it's Dancer, but I like to play more selfish jobs when it comes down to 24-man raids, because of course you can't really expect to be playing with a lot of other great people in there, and if I'm playing something like a Dancer, I want to know that I am supporting a good player as well, and I don't like seeing me do more personal damage than the person that is my dance partner, of course, because that doesn't really sit well with me. So that's why I like playing some more personal DPS focused jobs like Machinist, Black Mage or Samurai when I go into 24-man. So I've been playing a lot of Machinist. I played one round on Summoner just to kind of have a taste already, and then this week I finally went in as Black Mage to see how bad it was, because that is one of the things that I really enjoy about Black Mage. And White Mage technically has this as well. With White Mage is technically even worse because they have even less movement tools available to themselves when it comes down to like wanting to keep 100% uptime. But when it comes down to playing Black Mage in high-end content, making it so that you technically don't lose any damage by moving is a very important part of its kit, and because of that you approach a lot of fights in a different way. Because, for example, if you go in on a Machinist, you don't really care about the mechanics that are going on. You don't really care about the movement that you have to do because you just have full uptime. Doesn't matter what you do really. When it comes down to playing a melee DPS, of course, you need to be able to stay close range to the boss as much as possible, because moving away makes it so that you lose melee uptime, so you have kind of that to figure out. But then when it comes down to playing something like a Black Mage, your movement actually becomes incredibly important for you to be able to maintain DPS. Now, for people that are wondering like how much did I do well or not, I'll leave a link in the description to the FFXIV because this was actually one of the very few runs that I decided to parse because I was kind of curious to see how well I would be doing, and I was quite happy with the result, to be honest, for it being a first run. So that is really the main point that has always interested me about Black Mage. It's never been the complexity of the job, kind of like a Summoner, where the job itself, the complexity of the job, is what intrigues you to try to play it and to try to master it, because there's so many different movement parts. Because Black Mage is a fairly simple and straightforward job to play if we're talking about the dummy scenario, but the movement on Black Mage is the one thing that has always kept me coming back to the job, and what has always made it very interesting for me as well. Because if you take, again, a ranged physical DPS, you learn your rotation and then that is it, you're done pretty much, because you can always apply that rotation to the boss given there is no downtime. like for example a phase change or anything like that. But for the most part, you don't really have to care about movement, you don't have to care about positioning, because you have that freedom of movement, and you don't have that on casters, even less so on Black Mage. And that is what I really enjoy about that job, because it doesn't matter if you've done a fight 1,000 times on, let's say, a ranged physical or a melee. When you go in on a Black Mage, you're still going to be looking at that fight from a different angle. Where can I minimize movement? Where do I need my specific movement tools like a triple cast? Do I need to save Xenoglossies for a specific part? That is something that makes Black Mage incredibly interesting for me to play, and also makes it so that fights that you've done a bunch before already still stay interesting for you to do, because you now have to figure out this other aspect of the fight which you didn't really have to think about before, which is the movement. Now, of course, going into Shadowbringers, I think Black Mage has had some fantastic quality of life changes when it comes down to the way their rotation flows, with like Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 not really costing mana anymore when you switch in between your two stances. Thought that was really cool. But then also the quality of life that we have gotten to the movement of Black Mage. Sharpcast now only has half of the cooldown that it did back in Stormblood. Triple cast is still there, of course, which I don't think triple cast changed at all. But then we also got access to Xenoglossy now, which is another resource that we can use. Now, of course, when it comes down to approaching a new fight on Black Mage, I always try to approach it from a DPS perspective, where I want to be trying to use all of my cooldowns as they come up to put out as much DPS as possible. Because when I first started playing Black Mage more in the times of Stormblood, I would just sit on my triple cast in case I would have to use it. I wouldn't use it for DPS, I would use it for when I needed it for movement. And then sometimes I would just be sitting on my triple cast for so incredibly long that I was like, well, I could have used this twice now and still have it ready for when I really needed it to. So whenever I go into a new fight on Black Mage, I'll always try to use all of my abilities for damage purposes, and then see what I need to adjust when it comes down to the movement parts of the fights. Of course, when you're just going in once, like for example here in the 24-man, I could just improve on it week by week. But when it comes to, for example, a Savage fight, which you might like for example do a couple runs of in a day for your team, because you're like trying to practice the fight. Or of course, when it comes down to you progging the fight, like when they just come out, or when you are just getting to those fights, then you're of course going to be doing a bunch of different pulls back to back as well, so that you can figure out the movement as you go. And that is where it starts to get really interesting, because then you have to make the decision, do I need to save these movement tools for movement, or can I just use them for DPS? Because of course, triple cast is a DPS gain, being able to use sharp cast on your Thunder 3 is also a DPS gain, and using Xenoglossies under raid buffs, because Xenoglossy is a very potent attack, is also going to be a DPS gain. Now, of course, the way I usually like to play Black Mage is I'll use my sharp cast pretty much on cooldown. I don't really look at whether or not I am using it on a Thunder 3 or on a Fire 3. I just kind of use it on whatever is coming up at that point to just keep it on cooldown, to always have an instant cast available to me for when I do need to weave something, or for when I do need movement. Fire 3, like using sharp cast on Fire 3, or well, technically you use it on Fire 1 to get a free Fire 3. But basically, using it on that is very good when it comes down to giving you more leniency in your Fire phase, because it makes it so that you can just refresh that Astral Fire buff whenever you need to, so that you don't necessarily like lose out on a Fire 4 and a Despair cast or anything like that. So whenever I prog a fight, I usually tend to lean more towards getting more Fire Starter procs than Thundercloud procs from my sharp cast. When it comes down to triple cast, I pretty much always use this on cooldown. I think Shiva Savage is the only fight where I ever really saved it for mechanic, which was for the, what's it called again, Icelit Dragon Song. That's where I saved that for, but then again, I've only done like 4 runs of Shiva Savage on Black Mage, unfortunately enough. But basically, that's kind of like how I look at it. My backup plan is always the Xenoglossy. I know it's better to use them during like raid buffs and that kind of stuff, but I tend to just keep them in case I need an extra GCD during my ice phase to like get my full mana back, or of course for movement, because Xenoglossy is such a great skill that it pretty much fits anywhere in your rotation. As long as you're not running out of your Astral Fire buff, you can use it during your Fire phase, you can use it during your Ice phase whenever you need to as well. Need to weave a GCD or like an off-global cooldown, use it there. Need to, for example, get some movement, you can use it there as well. Don't need it for now, you can just stack it up twice and then just make sure you use it before you overcap your 2 stacks. So Xenoglossy is such a big quality of life. It's so simple because it's only one skill that you get access to every 30 seconds, but even such a small difference is actually going to make a very big impact on the Black Mage rotation when it comes down to its movement. So if I had to pick one thing that really makes me enjoy this job. It is the movement aspect of Black Mage. Yes, it is a fairly straightforward job to play because you're not pressing all that many buttons. You also don't have a crazy amount of off-global cooldowns that you have to manage, not too many buffs you have to play around with. And I think it's just a relatively enjoyable job to play. Like, for me, something doesn't necessarily have to be difficult for me to be enjoyable. For me, the fact that Black Mage is relatively straightforward to play is fine enough by me because it has this whole movement system attached to it, which is starting to make that job very interesting. Of course, makes it so that the job might be a little bit more boring to play in pretty much dummy fights where you don't have to move around all that much, but when you're playing fights that are very movement heavy, that is where a job like Black Mage becomes incredibly interesting to play, and where it's also incredibly satisfying to play once you do figure out your movement around the fight and then basically see your DPS increase pull by pull. That is something that I really enjoy about it. So that's pretty much why I like Black Mage quite a bit at the moment, and why I'm definitely going to be keeping it geared up going into the next tier as well. And then let's see what the next expansion has to bring for the job as well. I really hope they don't change it all that much, because I think at the moment most of the jobs feel fine to play, maybe with the exception of Monk, but I'm quite curious to see what the mini rework of Monk is going to be in patch 5.4. But for now, I'm definitely going to be enjoying all of the jobs that I have been enjoying so far already, which Black Mage definitely has a spot among those. I'm probably going to be gearing up with a little bit more spell speed as well, seeing how the next tier is still so far away, and I'm basically like fully geared on all of my jobs for now, so I might just like put my excess tomestones into getting my Black Mage some more spell speed gear as well, to kind of test that out as well, to see how much fun that could be. But that's gonna be it for me. I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.